Welcome back to Podcast for Artists. Today we're diving into one of the biggest questions for artists. Where do you actually sell your art?
In going beyond the usual galleries, like you might be surprised by some of these venues. Not only are they looking for art, but they can actually be incredibly successful for sales.
Okay, I'm all for shaking things up
Yeah.
because I think a lot of artists feel like galleries are like the only option.
Yeah.
So let's break that myth wide open. What are some of these unexpected places we could be selling?
Okay, so let's start with places people go to relax and enjoy themselves, like hospitality venues, think hotels, restaurants, and those cool independent coffee shops. They're always looking for ways to make their space um, unique and memorable.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, those places often have a really distinct aesthetic. So it makes sense that art would play into that.
Exactly. And for artists, it's a way to reach people who might not be actively seeking out art. Like take high-end hotels, for example. They often want their art to be a selling point, something that adds to the whole experience.
So it's not just decoration, it's part of the package.
Right. And here's the exciting part. Many hotels operate on a system where they sell the art on display, and the artist keeps 100% of the profit.
Oh, wow.
So it's not just exposure, it's a direct sales opportunity with high-end clientele.
That's brilliant. It totally flips the script on the traditional gallery commission structure.
Yeah.
How would an artist even begin to approach a hotel about something like that?
Well, one approach is to propose a rotating exhibition. You could even offer to curate the collection, suggest themes that tie into the hotel's style, or even host an opening reception. Think about what you can bring to the table that makes you a valuable partner.
It sounds like a win-win. The hotel gets a constantly evolving art experience, and the artist gets access to a whole new market. What about restaurants and coffee shops? I feel like those seem like a natural fit for art, too.
They are. These spaces are all about creating a vibe, and art can be a huge part of that. Plus, people are already there to relax, enjoy themselves, maybe have a conversation. Your art can become part of that experience.
I love that. It's like creating a whole mood,
Yeah.
and your art is setting the tone. But do these kinds of places actually lead to sales?
There's a great example in the UK, the Mitre. It's a venue in Richmond. They worked with local artists and ended up selling over 30,000 pounds of art in just 6 months.
Wow.
And guess what? Their revenue went up 12% in that same period.
Wow. That proves it's not just about exposure. It's about driving business for everyone involved.
Exactly. So how do you get started? Well, the key is to approach those cafes and restaurants you love, the ones whose aesthetic you connect with. Get to know the manager, build a relationship, and then propose a system where they get a small percentage if your work sells. It incentivizes them to help you succeed.
It's like you're becoming part of their team.
Yes.
Okay, so we've got hotels, restaurants, coffee shops. What other unexpected places should we be thinking about?
Well, retail spaces are a fascinating option. Think about boutiques or even furniture stores. They already have a curated style, so your art can complement that and attract a very specific customer.
You're right. If a boutique already carries clothing and jewelry I love, chances are I'll be into their art choices as well.
Exactly. Plus, imagine your art in a furniture store. People are already visualizing how things would look in their homes.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
It's like a built-in staging area. Do you have any tips for approaching these kinds of businesses?
For boutiques, I'd say go in with samples and a clear idea of your pricing. For furniture stores, maybe propose a rotating display so their showroom always feels fresh.
Okay, so we've covered places people go to relax, shop. Where else could we be selling art?
This might sound surprising, but public spaces have a lot of potential. Libraries, community centers, co-working spaces, even airports. Think about the sheer number of people who pass through those places every day.
You know, I wouldn't have thought of those as places to buy art, but you're making me rethink that,
Mm,
especially airports.
mm.
Everyone's always looking for something to do while they wait.
Right. Libraries, while they might not be focused on sales, are fantastic for connecting with your community. Maybe you offer to lead a workshop or an artist talk to get people engaged with your work.
I love that. You're not just selling art, you're becoming part of the community. What about those co-working spaces, the ones that are popping up everywhere?
Those are great for reaching a professional audience. People who are working there might be more likely to invest in art for their offices or homes. Plus, you can use QR codes on your pieces to directly link people to your website or online shop.
So smart and makes buying super easy. Okay. You mentioned airports earlier, which really intrigued me. That's a lot of potential eyeballs on your work, but how does that even work?
Well, airports are often managed by large organizations, so you might need to do some research to find the right contact. But think about it. Artist Ron Bass had a huge installation in JFK Airport's Terminal 7 just this year. His work transformed the whole space.
That's incredible. What advice would you give an artist who wants to get their foot in the door with a place like an airport?
Focus on how your art would enhance the traveler experience. Maybe it reflects the spirit of travel, or has a calming effect, and highlight the benefits to the airport. It could be anything from boosting morale to creating a unique landmark.
Okay, so we've got hotels, restaurants, boutiques, libraries, co-working spaces, airports. My mind is blown with possibilities.
That's the spirit. But before you run off to pitch your work, there's one crucial element we need to discuss: negotiating with these venues.
That's a great point. We need to make sure these partnerships are beneficial for both sides.
Exactly. Let's dive into the art of negotiation, because getting your art in these spaces is just the first step.
Right, you have to make sure people actually know it's for sale.
Exactly. So first things first, clear price tags. Don't make people guess or feel awkward about asking.
Yeah, makes it less intimidating for buyers, too. And while we're talking low-tech, what about the classic business card?
Yeah, never underestimate a business card, especially in places like spas or waiting rooms, where people might not want to interrupt their experience to ask for your information. Just have those readily available.
Simple, but effective. But these days, we can also use technology to our advantage. I'm thinking QR codes.
Absolutely. A QR code can instantly take someone to your website, your online shop, or even like a specific page with details about the piece they're looking at.
Yeah, it's like a bridge between the physical art and the digital world.
Yeah,
And people are so used to scanning QR codes now.
right. It removes that friction.
It just makes the whole process seamless.
Exactly. And while we're talking about making it easy, let's talk about payment options.
Yeah, that's a big one. What should artists be thinking about?
The more the better, I think. Credit cards are a must, and obviously PayPal is a popular choice. But you could even consider things like payment plans for larger pieces.
That makes a lot of sense, especially if you're in a venue where people might be making impulse buys. A payment plan can make art more accessible.
Exactly. It shows you're flexible and willing to work with people. Okay, so we've talked about making it easy to buy. But let's get real about some of the challenges of selling art in these non-traditional spaces.
Yeah, what are some of the hurdles artists might face?
Well, the first one is simply getting your foot in the door. These venues aren't necessarily putting out calls for artists. You need to be proactive. You need to do some legwork.
So networking is key here.
Absolutely. Go to those places as a customer, get to know the owners, the managers, attend events they host. Building relationships is crucial.
It's about making those personal connections. And then when you do approach them, what's the best strategy?
I think don't just talk about your art. Talk about what your art can bring to them. Will it enhance their ambiance, attract a certain type of customer, make their space more interesting?
So think about it from their perspective. What's in it for them?
Right. You're offering them a solution, not just asking for a favor. And once you do get that, yes, make sure you have a clear agreement in place.
Okay, let's talk about that. Contracts can feel intimidating, especially for artists who are used to a handshake deal. What are the essentials?
Yeah, don't be afraid to have a written agreement. It protects both of you. Clearly outline who's responsible for what, if there's any damage, how long the art will be displayed, any commission or fees, how you'll both promote the partnership.
It takes the guesswork out of the equation. And I imagine this is especially important in places like hotels, where your art is literally part of the business.
Exactly. Now, another challenge can be pricing your work for these different venues, and there's no magic formula.
Yeah. How do you find that sweet spot?
Consider your target audience at that venue. What's their price point? What's the overall feel of the space? And don't be afraid to offer a range of prices, from smaller, more affordable pieces to larger statement pieces.
That makes sense. Give people options. So we've talked about getting your foot in the door,
Yeah.
negotiating pricing. What other challenges should artists be prepared for?
One thing that can be tough is managing your time and energy, especially if you're working with multiple venues. It's easy to get overwhelmed.
It's like adding another layer to your already busy life as an artist. How do you keep from burning out?
Start small. Don't try to do everything at once. Maybe try one or two venues, get the hang of it, and then expand as you feel comfortable.
Okay.
And don't be afraid to ask for help. Maybe you have a friend who can help with deliveries or setting up displays.
Delegate. That's a
Yeah.
good reminder. Now let's talk about something that's hard for any artist, no matter where they're selling. Rejection. It's bound to happen.
It is. You won't be the right fit for every venue. And that's okay. It's not a reflection of your talent. Sometimes it's just a matter of taste, or maybe they already have a full roster of artists.
It stings, but you have to keep perspective.
Right. And use it as a learning opportunity. Did you clearly communicate your vision? Was your portfolio a good representation of your work? Could your pitch be stronger?
Yeah, turn that rejection into fuel for improvement. Okay, so you've overcome the hurdle of getting into a venue. You've got your pricing right. You're handling the logistics. How do you actually get people excited about your art once it's there?
You have to be your own best advocate. Use social media, email newsletters, even word of mouth. Tell people where your art is being showcased. Maybe offer a behind-the-scenes peek at how you installed it, or even a special discount for those who mention the venue.
Make it an event. Create a buzz around it.
Yeah.
I love that. Okay, so we've covered a lot of the practicalities and challenges, but let's talk about something that's easy to overlook. Presentation.
Presentation is everything. Your art should be framed or displayed in a way that complements the venue and makes it look its best. Make sure it's clean, well lit, and easy to see.
It's all about that first impression.
Right. And think about the little details too. Are your business cards neatly displayed? Do you have a sign with your name and website clearly visible? These things matter.
It shows you're paying attention
Yeah.
and that you care about how your art is perceived.
Now let's talk about another aspect that can be tricky. Handling customer interactions.
Okay, this is where some artists get nervous, especially if they're used to working in the studio and letting their art speak for itself. What advice would you give?
Be prepared to answer questions about your work. People are curious. They want to know your inspiration, your process, the story behind the piece. And just be yourself, be friendly, and be professional.
It's about building connections and letting your personality shine through.
Exactly. And every interaction, even if it doesn't lead to a sale right then and there, is an opportunity to make an impression and potentially gain a new follower or fan.
So true. Now let's talk about something that's always a factor in any business, especially the art world. Competition. How do you stand out when you're in a venue with other artists?
Focus on what makes your art unique. What's your voice? What story are you telling? Don't try to be like everyone else. Embrace your individuality.
Be authentically you.
Exactly. And remember, competition can be healthy. It can push you to be better and to constantly evolve your work.
It's like friendly fire that keeps you motivated.
Okay, so we've talked about so much. Finding the right venues, negotiating pricing presentation, handling interactions, dealing with competition. It can feel like a lot, but it's important to remember why you're doing this in the first place.
Bring us back to the heart of it. Why are we exploring these alternative avenues?
Because you're passionate about your art and you want to share it with the world. It's about finding new ways to connect with people, build your audience, and make a living doing what you love. Don't lose sight of that.
That's such an important reminder. It's easy to get bogged down in the logistics and forget why we started making art in the first place.
Right. And speaking of getting bogged down, one of the biggest challenges is simply staying positive and motivated, especially when things get tough.
Yeah, that's a real struggle for a lot of artists.
Yeah.
What advice would you give?
Celebrate your wins, big and small. Every time you get into a new venue, every time someone connects with your work, every sale you make, no matter how small. Acknowledge those accomplishments and surround yourself with people who believe in you and your art.
That support system is so important. It can make all the difference.
It really can. And remember, every successful artist has faced challenges along the way. It's part of the journey.
You're not alone. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground, but I think we have time for one more important topic before we wrap up. Let's talk about the bigger picture.
Sounds good.
I want to talk about the changing landscape of the art world. Galleries are still important, but these alternative avenues are opening up so many new possibilities for artists to take control of their careers and connect with their audience directly. What are your thoughts on that?
You're absolutely right. The art world is evolving, and artists have more power than ever before to define their own success. It's an exciting time to be an artist, and these alternative venues are a big part of that shift.
I love that perspective. So as we wrap up this episode, what are some key takeaways you want our listeners to remember?
I want them to feel empowered, to know that there are so many ways to get their art out into the world, and that they don't have to wait for someone to give them permission. It's about being proactive, creative, and resilient.
Those are powerful words. So to our listeners who are feeling inspired to explore these alternative venues, where can they go for more information and guidance?
There's a fantastic article on marketyourart.net. It's called Where Can I Sell My Art Exploring Alternative Venues? It goes into even more detail about the types of venues we discussed and offers practical tips for approaching them.
Perfect. We'll include a link to that article in the description of this episode. So thank you for joining us on this exploration of alternative venues. Go out there, be creative, be fearless, and find those spaces where your art can truly shine.
I think it can feel overwhelming for sure, but I hope our listeners are walking away with a sense of excitement too.
Yeah, it's all about being open to new possibilities.
Exactly. And that's what I want to emphasize as we wrap up. The importance of finding the right fit for you. Not every venue is going to be a good match for your style or the type of art you create.
So how do you know where to even start?
I think about your ideal customer. Where do they hang out? What kind of spaces do they enjoy? Then do some research. Visit those places. See what kind of art they already have on display. Get a feel for the atmosphere.
It's like dating.
Yeah,
You've got to find that perfect match.
that's a great analogy. And don't be afraid to start small. Maybe try 1 or 2 venues that really resonate with you and see how it goes. You can always expand your reach later.
Yeah, it's about building confidence and momentum. One success leads to another.
Right. And remember, even if a particular venue doesn't work out, it's not a failure. It's a learning experience. What did you learn from that experience? How can you apply that knowledge to your next venture?
It's all part of the journey.
Exactly. And speaking of journeys, I want to leave our listeners with a final thought. Don't underestimate the power of community.
What do you mean by that?
Connect with other artists. Share your experiences, support each other's work, celebrate each other's wins. The art world can be competitive, but it can also be incredibly supportive.
Yeah, it's about lifting each other up.
Right. When artists come together, amazing things can happen.
I love that. So to our listeners who are feeling inspired to explore these alternative venues, where can they go for more information and guidance?
There's a fantastic article on marketyourart.net. It's called Where Can I Sell My Art Exploring Alternative Venues? It goes into even more detail about the types of venues we discussed and offers practical tips for approaching them.
Perfect. We'll be sure to include a link to that article in the description of this episode. So thank you all for joining us today on Podcast for Artists and exploring these exciting alternative venues for selling your art. We'll see you next time.